So if you have your Bibles, will you do me a favor? Will you go ahead and grab them? We're going to be in John chapter 20. We'll be in verses 9 to 18. As you're turning there, I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick warning. I'm about to ask you a question that for some of you is going to bring up a little bit of trauma. It's going to be a question that's going to bring up a couple wounds for you that for some of us in this room, the minute I ask you the question, it's going to teleport you back to maybe middle school. It's going to teleport you back to a room that you would go, I would love never to go back into that room again. The room that you walked into that you still feel the fear of, that when you made it in there and you saw everybody kind of awkwardly and you went to the side of the room because for a moment you didn't quite feel seen and you didn't feel quite appreciated. It's going to be one of those questions that the moment I ask it for some of you, you will still be able to hear the laughter as you stood on the side of the room and you were terrified that it was about you, and yet there was a part of you that longed, hoping that it included you. And so here's the question. Have you ever felt invisible? Have you ever felt invisible? Truth is, every one of us has a story, don't we, where we felt invisible. Maybe for you, like me, mine, one of the very first ones I can ever remember was when I was in middle school, and the really pretty girl down the hallway was waving, and I waved, and she walked right past me to go say hi to the person she was waving to. And I wondered, am I invisible? Because I kind of feel that way. Or for you, maybe it has more to do with your job, that you told that really funny story or you gave that great idea at your staff meeting, and the boss didn't hear it, and then the coworker repeated it louder, and they got all the credit. And you're like, what gives? Am I invisible? I'll never forget one of the most awkward moments of my entire life happened when I was in fifth grade. When I was in fifth grade at the school that I went to, we had at the very end of the year, right about this time of the year, we had this big thing called a talent show. And so I don't know if since you don't really know me, let me go ahead and help you out, I don't have talent. I'm not very talented. If it has to do with a ball, like catching a ball, throw a ball, hit a ball, I've got a shot at being pretty okay. But when it comes to actual skill, like playing a piano, playing a guitar, singing, something like that, I've got no shot. So for me, I just sat there and watched people show their talents. And so that was up until that day in fifth grade when my friends thought it would be hilarious to sign me up for said talent show. That they even got the principal in on it too. And so I'll never forget, I'm sitting there eating my popcorn, drinking my drink, having a great time watching actual talented people do their talented thing. And over the intercom I hear, Ben Hendrix, if you would come on down, you're going to be up next to show us your freestyle karate routine. And I have a heart attack, wouldn't you? And I'm like, what in the world? I didn't sign up for this. And I look over to my buddies to the right, and they're dying laughing. And they're looking at me going, you got this. Spoiler alert, I don't got this. And so I get pulled down there by the principal, and I get thrown up on this stage, and for 60 seconds, I'm doing the best I can to channel my inner Kung Fu Panda, or any Napoleon Dynamite fans, Rex Kwon Do, bow to your sensei. And for 60 seconds, I'm just flailing, throwing around everything I got. It looked like I was boxing or trying to catch a bumblebee. Like I looked like a doofus. And I remember walking off that stage, I was red as that. And I wondered, and I just had this question in my head, am I invisible? Because I would really like to be invisible right now. Now, the truth is, every one of us has a story where we've wondered, am I invisible? And maybe for you, unlike mine, it's not all that lighthearted. That for you, it's actually a deep wound when you felt like nobody saw you and nobody cared to see you. That maybe for you, it's a childhood thing, that you were the birthday party that you always wanted that never actually happened, the present you wanted that you never actually got. Or for some of us even, do you remember recess? Maybe this was you, that they were going to play a sport and they were started picking teams and you got picked last or not at all, and you wondered, am I invisible? Or for some of you, it's not just a distant past thing, it's a very current reality. That when you think of your parenting, when you think about how the conversations you've had with your children, how you've tried to gently correct, how you tried to love and shepherd them, and they just ignore you and walk the other way anyways, and you wonder, am I invisible. Or maybe it's you for your marriage. All the conversations that you've had as you tried to share your heart with your husband. You tried to share your heart with your wife. And yet no matter what, no matter how open and honest you are, it feels like they just don't care and they keep moving on and they just keep missing it. And you wonder, what's going on? Am I invisible? Or maybe for you, it's really a job thing. That you've put in the extra hours, you put in all the hard work and all the time to get that promotion, and yet no matter what you do and no matter where you go, it feels like it always goes to somebody else, and you've wondered what I've wondered, am I invisible? Now the truth is, and the really difficult thing is, this question isn't just about our relationships. It's not just about our jobs. It's not just about what we have going on in our lives, but it has everything to do with our walks with the Lord, doesn't it? That if you are open and you are honest, you would admit that at some point in your walk with the Lord, you've wondered and you've struggled and wrestled with this question with God. That maybe for you it was everything to do with your prayer life. That you were asking the Lord in a difficult season of time, Lord, why aren't you answering me? Because it feels like you're answering everybody else, but you're not answering me. Am I invisible? Or maybe for you it had nothing to do with the unanswered prayers, but the way he did answer those prayers. And that they weren't the ways that you expected. And it seems like he doesn't care, and you wonder, Lord, are you just mailing this in? Am I invisible? Because the truth is, every one of us, every single one of us, no matter how long you've walked with the Lord at all, we've all wondered, does God even know that I'm here? Because I feel invisible right now. The truth is, behind this word and this feeling are two fears that every one of us has struggled with. And the very first one is this, that he isn't there. And you see, the truth is, for most of us, it's not that he's not there at all. It's the idea that he's not there for us, for me, for you. That in the moment, in the situation that we're walking in, it feels like he's just not going to actually show up. This is why, for so many of us, our greatest wrestles and our greatest struggles, and why we find such a lack of joy as we take the steps of faith and the steps of obedience to follow Jesus in our finances, in our relationships, in our workplaces. Because we have this undying fear that because we take that step of faith to trust him, that he won't be there on the other side. Isn't that true for you? It's true for me. Which is why, isn't it true that you've looked at someone's story, their healing that they got, the provision that God gave them, the answered prayer, the way that he showed up for them, and you've asked this question, I have, why not me, Lord? Because of the truth, we feel that he may not be there, and that he might be there, but I'm not sure he's there for me. Which leads us to the second fear, is that he isn't there and that he's unaware. Now I need some participation in here. You ready? Raise your hand if you've ever held back a prayer from God because you thought it was too small for him to care about. This is true for me. Because every one of us, no matter where we are, I believe at some point we've all said this to God. I don't want to bother God with this. It just feels so small. Like how many times have I gone to the Lord, gone, Lord, I don't know where my AirPod is. I've lost one. But can you help? I don't want to bother God with this. Like, Lord, I'm one Netflix password mess up away from being locked out of my account. Can you help? I don't want to bother God with this. It's too small. He won't care. And the truth is, what we ultimately do when we do this is we filter, don't we? Is that we separate how we actually feel and what we're really wrestling with who God actually is. And so when we do that and when we separate those and when we filter, there's a distance that we create between who we are and who we believe God is. And for the truth is, for many of us, we end up walking away. We end up stepping away. We end up creating and going down that distance, believing that he doesn't care, even though we never actually asked for help. So let me ask you, for those of you who right now are going through difficult situations, for those of you who are having to go into hospital rooms begging for prayer and begging for just the courage to keep walking into those in faith and to have assurance and confidence in those. For those of you who right now feel like you have so many prayers that have gone unanswered by God. For those of you who don't feel confident and don't feel assured in the faith that God has given you and the one that you're walking in. For those of you who feel Like God doesn't see you. Let me ask you the question. Have you ever felt invisible? Because if you answer yes to this, here's the good news, is that puts you in a category of so many other men and women, faithful men and women in the Bible who have wrestled with this exact same question, who have asked this of the Lord and have wondered and questioned whether or not God actually is there and he actually cares. In the book of Isaiah, God gives this great address as he addresses the nation of Israel, as Israel is in exile in Babylon. And they're screaming out to God, wondering if God is really there, if he actually cares, longing to be in relationship with him. And here's what God says on their behalf. He says, but Zion here represents Israel, said, the Lord has forsaken me. Have you ever felt that way? My Lord has forgotten me. Or Moses in Exodus 33, as Moses has walked down the mountain and has walked through the camp and seen the golden calf and all that God would do to change that. And it feels like God is not keeping up with the promises that he has made to Moses. And so Moses says this incredible thing. He says, bring up this people, the one that you've given me, but you have not let me know who you will send with me. Can I translate that for you? He says, are you sure you have my best interest at heart? Have you ever asked that before? Like, Lord, I know that you're there, and I know that you're paying attention. I know that you're powerful, and I know that you're sovereign. And I know you care about them. I see you showing up for them. But are you sure you have my best interest at heart? Are you sure that you actually care about me? Or the question the disciples ultimately have in Luke 8, as they're walking through a crowd following Jesus, bumping shoulder to shoulder in a crowd of hundreds to even thousands of people. And Jesus feels a power come out of him. And he says, who was it that touched me? And I love what Peter says here. He says, when all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowds surround you and are pressing in on you. Like, how would we know who touched you? And the better question, why do you care? And the question that every one of the disciples was wondering in this moment, that maybe you've wondered, because I know I've wondered it, is does God really see? Does he really care? And does he really know each of us? And here's what I love, is that whether it was the nation of Israel and Isaiah in exile, whether it was Moses himself walking through the frustrations of the people of Israel, wondering if God was really going to keep his word, wondering if God really had his best interest at heart, or it was even the disciples wondering, does God really see? Does he care? Does he know each of us? God answers it in exactly the same way. He says this to Isaiah, to the nation of Israel, longing to be out of exile. Can a woman forget her nursing child, that she should have no compassion on the son of her womb? Even these may forget, yet I will not forget you. Why? I love this. Behold, I have engraved you on the palms of my hand. I have written your name on my hand. To Moses in Exodus. Again, walking through the frustrations of the people of Israel, wondering if God will keep his promises and if he really has his best interest at heart. Here's how God answers him. He says, and the Lord said to Moses, this very thing that you have spoken I will do, for you have found favor in my sight. Look, and I know you by what? Look at the way Jesus responds to the disciples as they're wondering, does God really know us? Does God really want to know us? Does God care about each of us? In a crowd of thousands, does he think about the individual? Here's how Jesus answers. He says this in John 10. He says, to him the gatekeeper opens. The sheep hear his voice and look, and he calls his own sheep by name. So let me ask you the question. When it comes to the nation of Israel, in rebellion, in exile, when it comes to Moses as he's wrestling, wondering if God really cares and really has his best interest at heart. And when it comes to the disciples who are wondering if God really wants to know them and really cares about them, how does God respond to their questions, to their fear, to their anxiety, and to the concerns? How does God respond to your fear, to your anxiety, and to your questions and concerns? In the same way. I know your name. Which brings us to John 20, where we meet a lady named Mary Magdalene. And Luke 8 tells us a little bit. The Bible's not completely clear on all the details about Mary Magdalene, but Luke 8 gives us a great picture of who she is, and it gives us two ideas really quickly. Is that she has, at one point in her life, an incredible encounter with Jesus. That when Jesus met Mary, he steps into her life and takes 7 demons away from her. That she must have had a past. Imagine the history that she had by living so much of her life, having 7 demons. And that because of the encounter that she has with Jesus, that I would hope that I would do this as well, that she joins the traveling ministry with Jesus for 2 years. That for 2 years, Mary Magdalene walks along with the disciples and Jesus from city to city, town to town, watching miracle, teaching to teaching. And so think about it. Imagine what she saw. Imagine what she saw at the pool of Bethesda as Jesus steps into the lame man's life and he heals him, and a man who had never walked now sprints out from there. Imagine what she saw on that afternoon as Jesus takes 5 loaves and 2 fish in that field, and he turns them into a meal that feeds more than 5,000 people. And imagine what she saw and what she heard on that fateful morning as she watched her Savior, her Lord, and her friend hang upon that cross. Imagine what she heard as he cried out, "It is finished." And he gives up his spirit. And imagine what she felt. And imagine the darkness and the loneliness that she walked in for those 40 hours as she sat alone by herself in the dark, wondering what had she wasted her life on as her Lord and her friend had died. And she wondered, is my future bleak or non-existent at all? And so she runs to the tomb on that morning and she finds that the body is gone, which takes us to verse 11. And there we find her, but Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. And as she wept, she stooped to look in the tomb. I want to pause right here, and I want to take a little look at this word for weeping. Now, the word here that we sometimes look over and sometimes I call a Hallmark cry, we often just kind of think it's a Hallmark cry. Like for just a moment, she kind of just stopped for a second and the tear fell down her eyes as she looked and panned into the camera and her eyes glistened. Her like, yeah, you look really good crying. Wow, you ever met those people? I've met those people. I'm not that kind of person. I do the ugly cry. That's me. And so for her, this word here, we need to make sure we understand, is not a pretty cry. It means to mourn. It means to wail aloud. The idea here is that it's ongoing, that it's unrestrained, and it's inconsolable. She was not holding it together. And of course she wasn't, because her Lord, her friend, was gone. He had died. And to make matters worse, someone had taken the body. So before I move on, let me ask you a question. If you found out someone who you loved dearly had died, and you watched it happen, and you found out that someone had taken the body, how would you react? How would you feel? How would you mourn? Because the word here that is used for weeping is actually the very same word that Luke uses as he's talking about the sinful woman who is weeping over the feet of Jesus and uses her tears and her hair to clean and wipe his feet. So let me ask you another question, one that you've never thought about before. How many tears do you think it takes to wipe someone's feet? Do you know what the answer is? An unbelievable weeping amount. And it's also the same word that John uses in John 11 as he's talking about Mary and as she's weeping over the death of her brother Lazarus. The idea here is that she's not holding it together, that she is mourning, that she is weeping, that she is screaming aloud. And of course she is, because she has just lost her who? Her Lord and her friend. And she wonders, maybe like you have at different times in your life, is the future that I had planned, is it gone? Have I lost track and I've lost sight of where God is taking me, of what I have going forward? And I'm terrified and I'm scared of what God might be doing, and I feel lost. And I'm calling out to God, and I've walked with him for 2 years, and he's absent now. And I'm wondering, God, do you see me? Do you know that I'm here? Because right now I feel what? Invisible. And as she stoops and she looks into the tomb, verse 12, and she saw 2 angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. And the angels asked this question as they see her weeping and mourning. And they said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" Now, let me Let me help explain this just a little bit because this feels almost indefensible, doesn't it? Like, how mean are these angels? I think the truth is, if you think about it, like you see this lady, and of course she's weeping, of course she's mourning because all that she sees is the place where the body of Jesus should have been, and it's absent. So clearly someone has taken the body and stolen it, and her future is gone, and now the body is as well. There's nothing left to hold on to. But what I want you to see is the angels aren't being rude here. They're not being mean. They are genuinely confused by her response. Why? Because she couldn't imagine a world in which resurrection could take place. And they couldn't imagine a world where you wouldn't celebrate the resurrection that had taken place. And so the question is not judgmental. It's not shameful. It's, why are you weeping over this incredible news? So let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a reaction that didn't equate to the situation? Ask a different way. Have you ever seen someone's reaction, their response, that didn't quite equate to the situation that was at hand? Parents, this is our lot in life if you have little kids, all right? Just the other morning, I was sitting there, I was kind of writing through some of this sermon, and my 3.5-year-old daughter walks up to me right about breakfast time, and she walks up and she says, "Daddy, I'm hungry." I was like, "Awesome. What can I get you, baby?" And so she goes, "I want a banana." Now, this may not be true for you, but for many of you, you will know that the two greatest divisive fruits in the world are the fruit that Adam and Eve took from the tree that caused sin and death, and a banana. Because for my daughter, it's all about it has to be perfect. The perfect way to peel it, the perfect way to hold it, and I've just learned because I've walked through I have trauma for this. And you peel it halfway down so she can hold onto the banana at the bottom so she doesn't get her hands messy. And she eats it, and it has to be perfect. And so for her, I peel it just right. It's perfect. I'm ready. I got to get back to the message. I hand it to her, and she takes one bite, and guess what happens? It breaks. No mold, doesn't even fall to the ground. She catches it, and she looks up at me, tears flowing, snot pouring. She's like, "Daddy!" It's like as if she was having a banana funeral. Like she's just weeping, like, "No, everything's lost." So like any good parent, how do I respond? Oh, that's hilarious. Why did I respond that way? Because I saw the other 5 bananas sitting on the counter. And I knew that we were one brand new 58-cent a pound banana away from having smile on our face again. Because the truth is, I knew how this story ends with a new banana and a happy child. And so what I want you to see here is the angels, as they ask this question, they're confused. Why? Because for them, they couldn't see a world where we didn't understand the resurrection. They're saying, if you could see what we see, you wouldn't be crying, you'd be dancing, Mary. You don't know what's happened. Because we know how this story ends. But like you and like me, so often we miss out on how the story ends, don't we? Because we're too close to the situation, we're too marked by the grief that we're in, and we're blinded, and we miss out on what God is ultimately doing. And so Mary misses it. And I love this. She answers the question literally. She says in verse 13, she said to them, "They have taken away my Lord." Of course I'm crying. "You've taken away my Lord. Why don't you understand? And I do not know where they have laid him." And having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Now, before we get to the next question, because Jesus is about to do something that too often when we're reading through this passage that we skip right over and we miss out on the impact of what Jesus is trying to tell us. That in the next next verse, that Jesus is about to invite us and ask 2 questions. The first one is absolutely to Mary. And the second one is to Mary that she doesn't understand the influence of and the impact of in the moment. But Jesus takes a step through the pages of the Bible. He takes a step out through the pages of time. And he looks to you and he looks to me and he asks a question that is meant to reveal what he has come to do and who he actually is. And here's what he says. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" The same question the angels ask. And then he adds, "Whom are you seeking?" See, we miss the impact and the influence of this question. But for the first century Jewish reader, they would have gotten the impact of it. Because where is Jesus standing? In a garden. And not just any garden, but a garden tomb. The very place he had been buried when he stands there with a weeping Mary. And he speaks these very first words before he ever says her name, Mary. He asks this question, whom are you seeking? But this isn't the very first time God has ever asked a question like this one in a garden, is it? All the way back in Genesis 3, we find Adam and Eve who have taken a fruit from the tree of good and evil, and they've eaten it, and they have been separated by God. And there in that garden, they see their brokenness, and they see their sin, and they go and hide themselves by making clothing, and they go and hide away from God. And God, in the cool of the day, goes and looks for them, and he says, but the Lord God called to the man, Adam, and said to him, where are you? Whom are you seeking? Where are you? Now, what I want you to see is what the word behind this is really this word, ayika. Say it with me, ayika. Look to your neighbor to your left or your right and say, ayika. This is, where are you? And so here's what I want you to see, ready? Is when Jesus asks us, and we miss the power of this, is that it holds two important facts. That it's always initiated by God. That in the garden in Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, and sin has entered into the world, and brokenness feels so fresh as who they are, and they are doing their best to hide. They're not looking for God, are they? Because they have just sinned, they've just fallen short, they feel judged, and they feel tiny, and they're hoping to feel invisible. And God steps into the garden, and he goes, where are you, Adam? Where are you, Eve? Where are you hiding? It's initiated by God. But number two, it's extremely personal. This isn't a general you. It's not just anybody who'll listen to me, anybody who'll pay attention to me. Hey, you out there, whoever. No. It's personal. It's you. That he looks to you and he looks to me and he says your name. And he says, where are you? And so what Jesus is saying, he's making a connection between the brokenness that happens in the garden in Genesis and the fallenness and blindness that we see in the garden here after the resurrection. He says, look, there's two gardens. Look, there's two moments of brokenness. One so fresh for Adam and Eve, and one that feels so long and seems like it has no end. And there's two questions. And in both, God seeks out the lost. And here's what I want you to see today, is that for every one of us, this is true, that God is always seeking a relationship with you. Now come here. No matter what you've done, no matter the mess that you're in or the brokenness that you feel that you are in today, that you could never get out of, that will never change, it's generational, and it's no matter what you do, you will always have it. God is still seeking a relationship with you. That no matter what the things that you go, these will just have always been a part of me and I will always wrestle with these. And that if he really knew about these, he wouldn't want a relationship with me. He looks to you and he looks to me and he says, no, I want a relationship with you. That no matter what it is that you've been written off on, that people, maybe that you haven't gotten the job because of you've done, or the relationship ended with your spouse, or the relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend, because they found out this about you, God will not end it. He is still seeking you out. That no matter how long you have been running, no how distant you feel, no matter how lost you are right now, or it feels that you are, God is not ashamed by you, not ashamed by the things that you've done, and he doesn't look at you and ever shy away from you, because there's never the moment where we could possibly ever outsin that cross. There's never the moment where God looks at you and says, you're too bad, you're too sinful, there's nothing I can do with you. And so he shies away from you. He never does that. Why? Because ayika. He's always seeking a relationship with you. And so right now, if you've been running, if you've been walking away, if you've been shying away from what God wants to do and what he's inviting you into, he is seeking you out. That right now he's standing at the door of your life and he's knocking. That maybe he's knocking through a connect group, maybe he's knocking through messages, maybe he's knocking through a friend that you know, but he's knocking through the word of God, I know. And he's waiting for you to open the door because he wants to commune with you and sit with you and be a part of your life, because he's always seeking you. And so if right now you're running, if right now it just seems like you're walking, right now it just feels like you're drifting, you don't have to. If it feels like it's because, God, I've done too much, I've gone too far and I can't go back, he laughs at that. Because God, ayika, is always seeking a relationship with you and he initiates it. And right now, he's waiting for you to respond. And he does so by saying your name. When I was 8 years old, my mom took me on a shopping trip to one of the greatest places on earth. Sears. Anybody remember Sears? Yeah. This place was awesome, man. I'm telling you. It was like the only place that you could get power tools and a pool noodle on the same aisle. It was awesome. They had everything. And so I remember walking in there for whatever my mom wanted, and I had, it's the greatest place on earth if you wanted to play a prank because you could hide anywhere. And some of you will remember this from the 90s and early 2000s, is they had a whole area that was filled with these amazing things, the round clothing racks that you could go hide in. It was awesome. And so you know where I'm going with this. And so we were walking in there, and I had this great idea pop into my head. I'm like, I'm going to go scare my mom. And so I run off, and she says, where are you going? I said, I'm just going to look over here. I know where you're going. I'll find you. She's like, don't lose me. And I go, oh, I won't. And so I run over to one that's kind of near the aisle that I knew she would walk down, and I open up the clothes, and I step in. It was like stepping through the wardrobe into Narnia, and you're like, oh, this is awesome. And you just kind of feel hidden in there, and so I'm listening, and I'm kind of peeking out, waiting to try to get a glimpse of my mom, and I wait long enough, and all of a sudden I hear her. And so I open the clothes, and I jump out, and I'm like, ah! And I scared this poor stranger woman half to death. And I'm telling you, she about killed me because she was swinging her purse at me. And I was like, ah! And I'm dying laughing. Until all of a sudden I realized that's not my mom. And then I realized that's not my mom. And I started to panic, and I started to spiral. I'm like, does she know where I am? Am I lost forever? Am I going to have to move in here? Am I going to have to live in one of these? Like everything's gone. Oh no, what am I going to do? And I was just beginning to panic. And I'll never forget, over the intercom, I hear this. Ben, this is your mother. Get to customer service now. I'll never forget the relief I felt, that in my anxiety, in that panic, I heard my mother's voice say my name, which didn't last long because she whooped my butt when we got to the car. But I'm telling you, I'll never forget the relief. When I felt lost, when I felt like I wasn't seen, where I didn't know where I was, and I felt invisible. And in the same way, kind of the same way, Mary is here in the garden, and she feels lost, and she feels broken, and she doesn't know if she's seen. She doesn't know if God cares, and she doesn't even know if he's aware of her. And she's wondering in this moment, I saw him face to face. I watched him do that, but now I feel so distant from him. I feel invisible. And what I love is that Jesus, with one word, shows up for her in the most powerful life change of her life when he says, Mary. And what I want you to see and what I love about this is he takes her in life change. It takes her from darkness to light, from brokenness to redemption, from confusion to clarity with one word. And in that word, here's what I want you to see. He doesn't give her information. I'm pretty sure she knew her name. He doesn't sit her down and go, well, now, Mary, let me walk you through the major tenets of the Christian faith so that now you'll know. He doesn't give her information about who he is or the things that he's doing or what she needs to know to follow him. No. He gives her recognition that he steps into her brokenness. He steps into her life. He steps into her confusion, into her fear, into the mess that she's in when everything feels lost and everything it feels invisible and she feels invisible. And he says one thing, not information, but recognition. I know your name, Mary. And so what I want you to see tonight or today is that wherever you are right now, that he's not trying to step into your life and just give you more information. No, he wants to start with your name. He wants to start with recognition and meet you where you are. Because the answer when we feel invisible, when we are scared, when we don't know where we are, when we feel lost, when we feel like God is unaware, he doesn't care, is not more information, it's recognition. Because at the heart, here's what I want you to see, because at the heart of the gospel is the unbelievable truth that God knows your name. That no matter how bad things have gotten, God knows your name. No matter how far you've run, God knows your name. That no matter where you are, what you've done, no matter how bad or confused you feel or it's gotten, God knows your name. And it makes all the difference in the world for her as she's mourning, as she's weeping, and it all of a sudden turns into joy. Because the tears don't stop because she understands why she's suffering. They don't stop because she finally understands the resurrection, that it's all the pieces have come together. No, she stops. The tears stop because she's finally seen. That in her brokenness, in her mess, and in the wounds, God steps into them like he steps into your life, like he stepped into mine, and he says, no, I see you. I'm here for you. And how do you know? Because I know your name. Let me ask you a question. What part of your life are you desperate for God to notice right now? What's the thing? Is it your job? Is it you at your workplace? Is it you in your marriage? Is it you in the relationship with your boyfriend or girlfriend? Is it you in the relationship with your kids? What is it right now? Is it you with your finances? That right now, in whatever it is for you, that you feel alone, that you feel desperate, that you're longing for God to remind you that he cares and that he's aware, and that you're desperate for him to notice. Ask a different way. Where do you most need to hear God call your name? Where is it? Because here's what I know. He wants to. He wants to step into whatever it is, no matter how broken or messy it feels, no matter how much of a grip and a grasp that you have on what's going on and you feel like you've got it all together. He wants to. That he wants to step into whatever it is that you have in your life and be a part of your life. Why? Because he cares. How do I know? Because he knows your name. Because he wants you to know that you are not invisible to God. But again, no matter how much it feels like you are right now, no matter how lost you feel, no matter how broken, no matter how messy, no matter how unput together and how much you feel like you're falling short of the glory of God, he looks to you and he looks to me and he says, no, I see you and I care about you and I want to be a part of what you have going on. I want to be a part of the resurrection process in that thing. I want to be a part of the healing process in that place because I see you and I care about you. And that no matter how you feel, and no matter how walked over and looked over it looks, no matter how distant you feel from me right now, you are not invisible to God. Because the thing that brought Mary hope is the same thing that God wants to bring you and me and all of us hope for, is this idea that everything will be okay. Not perfect, not just the way that you want it, but everything will be okay in the end. Why? Since God knows my name. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to talk to the person to your left or the right. Here's what I want you to say. I want you to say, he knows my name, so he knows my need. He knows my name, so he knows my need. He knows your name, so he knows your need. That whatever it is that you're walking in, whatever struggle that you're having right now, that you feel like he's unaware, he doesn't care, whatever it is that he feels so distant from, that you feel so lost in, that it feels like, God, I don't even think that you pay attention to me. I don't even think you remember who I am because you haven't shown up in so long, Lord. He looks to you and he looks to me and he says, I know your name and I know your need. I want to be a part of whatever it is. Why? Because I know your name and I know your need. That whatever it is that you are looking at, that God is calling you to take that step of faith in. That maybe it's your job, maybe it's in your marriage, maybe it's in your relationships, maybe whatever it is in your finances. I have no idea. Maybe it's just to start serving here at church. That God says, I know your name, which means that I know your needs. Would you be open with them today with him? Because he wants to be a part of what they are if you'll just simply invite, because he's sitting there knocking at the door to be a part of what you have going on in your life. Because right now, here's what I know is true. He knows your name. And he knows your need. Which means 4 things. Can I give them to you really fast? Then number 1 is that he sees you. You are not overlooked. Truth is, every one of us, and we talked about this earlier, is that sometimes we all have felt invisible. And we've all wondered the question, does God even know that I'm here? One of my favorite verses in all of the Bible is Isaiah 43:1, that just erases this thought every time that I think of it. I'd love to invite you into. And here's what God says to a nation that is longing for the presence of God. And again, he says, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I've called you by name. He says, you are mine. Number 2, he says he hears you. You are not ignored. We've all wondered that in our prayer lines, there may be what feels like unanswered prayers that we've wondered if God is really listening. I love in Psalm 6:9, the psalmist David actually says this. He says, the Lord has heard my plea. The Lord accepts my prayer. Can I translate that for you for 2025? Here's what it means. God picks up the phone when you call. I mean, think about it. When you get a phone call, and I get all these all the time, that it pops up on your phone and it has unknown, or it says spam risk, what do? You hit that red button faster than lightning. But what would you do if you got a phone call from the parent, from the loved one that has died years ago? From the student, from the child that you have been longing to hear because the relationship feels fractured and it feels like they haven't called in decades. What would you do if you had the chance to talk to the person that you love the most and they called you and you saw their name? As fast as lightning. And so when you reach out to God and you ask him for help and he will always show up because God will always answer your prayers. And it may not look like you want it. It may not give the result that we feel like we need, but he is always, always answering. Why? Because he knows your name. Number 3 is that he defines you. You are not what God calls you. Truth is, every one of us has been given a name that we wish we could get rid of. The world has entitled you, has given you something and defined you in a way that we need to, as believers, reject and to push away from. And so what God says here, I love this, Jesus says this in Revelation 2:17, he says, to the one who conquers, these are the faithful at the end. He says, I will give some of the hidden man and I will give a white stone, I love this, with a new name written on the stone. That I love that Jesus talks about that we have our name written in the Lamb's book of life before the foundation of the earth. And that at the end of all time, we have a name written on a small stone that he will give to us. Which is the reminder to you and the reminder to me that no matter what the world calls you, no matter how the world puts you down, no matter how the world mocks you and says, this is who you are and you will never be anything else, Jesus looks at you and he looks at me and he looks at all of us and says, it isn't true because I've given you a name. This is who you are. Be faithful in it, walk in it, because I know who you are. You are not what others called you. You are not what your worst decision says about you, because you are who he says you are. Number 4, he can help you. There is always hope. We've all had moments where we felt too broken, too far gone, and that we were beyond repair. That maybe it's in your marriage, maybe it's in another relationship, maybe in your finances, maybe you feel so lost or broken, you just have given up because there's no hope and there's no help, and you're too far beyond repair. One of my favorite stories is John 11, as Jesus walks in days late to his friend Lazarus' death. And there he's met by Mary, who ends up saying, I know that one day she finds the faith that we will meet at the resurrection. And what does Jesus say? These unbelievable words. And he says, I am the resurrection and the life. So here's what I want you to see. The pain you thought that it could never heal, the shame you thought that would never stick, the addiction you thought that could never be, that whatever it is that you've held on to and then whatever it is that's held on to you, that you said this has always been a part of my life and I'll never be able to get past it, I'll never be able to grow out of it, that even Jesus himself will never be able to fix it and heal it, that Jesus looks to you and he looks to me and he says, it doesn't have to be this way. Why? Because God, the resurrection, knows your name. That he steps up to us and says, everything that you've ever been held back, the chains that are holding you down, the addictions that have a piece of you, anything that's holding you that you think there's no way that these can be broken, there's no help for me, that these will always mark me and these will always define me. He looks to us and says, it doesn't have to, because I'm the resurrection and I know your name. And here's the best part, that for those that you've been praying for, that those that you're longing for God to make a difference in your life, that you struggled not writing off as being too far away from God, that for some of you, this is you. You go, I can't take that step. I can't go that far. That even the resurrection feels too much like this. God says, I am the resurrection and I know your name and I know their name. And that if you will just take the step with me as I call your name and you will open the door and walk with me, then you will watch me work in you. Because the greatest act that God ever wants to do is resurrection in and through you. And it starts with your name. As he calls out to you, as he calls out to me. because God knows your name. What could we not walk in if we knew that truth? God knows your name. Let me ask you another question. If this matters to God, and it does, shouldn't this matter to us, his church, as well? Several years ago, a while back, a family friend of mine was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. Aggressive, deadly, and short of a miracle, the result of it was clear, and it wasn't good. And I was burdened for this family friend. And I was praying for them, and eventually I got the courage to actually ask them, have you talked to the elders at your church? Because believe it or not, the Bible is actually very clear on when we're sick, what we should do. And I'll never forget the way this family friend answered me. And they said, well, I tried, and they put me on the prayer list. And I was burdened for them. And it wasn't enough with me, and so I talked with them, and I asked their permission. They gave it to me, and I called their church, and I talked to the person at the front desk, and I was like, hey, look, my name is Ben, I'm a pastor, and I don't want this to be rude, but I just want you to know that you've got somebody in your church, a family member, friend of mine, who is dying of stage 4 cancer, and can we get, believe it or not, the Bible is very clear on what we should do, and it says that we should call for the elders. Can I have some of your elders come and meet with this person? And that they should pray over them, and they should anoint them with oil, and they can confess their sins, because God has made a promise that if this sickness has anything to do with sin, that he will redeem it and that he will heal it. And the person looked at me and they're like, let me see if I can transfer you to somebody, one of our adult pastors, this large church. And eventually they get me, after bouncing me around a couple times, to a guy, one of their adult pastors, who I end up kind of humbly trying to walk this again. So, hey, I just want somebody to help and to step into this family friend's life and to be a part of this, because God's called us to do this. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes, I'm sorry, sir, we don't actually do this. And I'll never forget what he said next, when he said, but we're too big to know everyone personally. Because I don't know their name. Friends, what I want to invite you into is that this is not the right way to do church. Because at the heart of what God is doing in his church are two things. It's mission and it's relationship. It's the unbelievable idea that God wants to seek and save the lost, and he will, but he will not lose any, and that he will know everyone. It's built on the idea that church is built on relationships. The unbelievable, beautiful idea that we need people in our lives who know our mess and we know theirs. That people that we can rely on and trust in, and who rely on us and trust in us when life gets hard. Because like Mary, life will get hard. You know that. You've walked through it. Because what he wants us to see and wants us to know is that every one of us needs every one of us. That you matter and I matter and we need to know each other's names. Because it's hard to be here. It's hard to be the church that God has called us to be when we are so distant that we feel like we don't actually know each other. And friends, what I want to tell you is that this is why we make a commitment here at One Church to do things the way that we do them. Is that we want to seek and to save the lost, but we will not do it at the loss of our names, at the loss of connection, at the loss of intimacy of what God wants for us. This is why that we push connect groups as often as we do, because we need people in our lives, and we need to be in people's lives who know our mess and we know theirs, who can step in and give us the encouragement that God knows your name in the situation that you're in. Because God wants you to know it, and he most often uses other people to declare it. And that we need to be people who are situated in community. This is why we do our student ministries and our college ministries the way that we do. Because we never want to be a church that's too big that we don't know each other's names. Friends, this is why we plant churches. Yes, because we want to plant churches all over Murfreesboro and to see God do a work and to do a mighty work and to see the dead come to life as God seeks and saves the lost. But it cannot come at the cost of our names, because God has called us to fulfill the Great Commission, to make disciples, to go to the ends of the earth. But he's also called us to fulfill the greatest commandment, to love others as Christ has loved us. And friends, we cannot do both of these if we don't know each other's names, because it begins by being like Jesus and knowing each other's names. And so today, God is inviting you to take a step into knowing each other's names, to being a body that knows each other, that when the wounds are there and he's inviting you to make a difference in somebody's life, you can walk up to them and you know their name and you know their story, because here's why. God knows your name and he knows your story. And he built his church to replicate and to look like him. And it begins by us knowing each other's stories and knowing each other's names. Imagine who we could all be. Imagine the church that God is building when it's built on his name.